Hey there, knife people. It's Pocket Knife Collector. Today I'm going to talk about a subject that it's a little bit touchy. People have strong opinions. I'm going to talk about expensive production knives. Knives that are maybe kind of on the edge of being what we might call mid-tech knives, right? Knives that are mass produced, but that have some hand finishing or some, some real artistry involved in the process. But it's not a full custom knife, right? I've decided explicitly to exclude custom knives from this conversation because the sort of assessment of value there kind of follows a little bit different rules, right? I mean, a lot of those custom knives are one-offs. They're really completely unique, and so what the knife is worth is what it's worth to the one person who's going to buy that particular knife, right? And if they really like it, then it's worth a lot. And if they have the means, it's worth a lot. So I'm going to talk about knives that have retail prices for that model, right? Like you could get one, and then you could go back and buy three more of them, right, at the same price, which is not the way that custom knives generally work. So I've got some knives here that are not cheap, and I want to talk a little bit about what differentiates them and what makes some of them cost what they cost. And we'll talk a little bit about whether or not those things are appropriate. And then I'm going to unbox something. So that'll be an interesting way to wrap this all up. Okay, so I think basically there's, if we're talking about stuff in new condition, not all of these knives are in new condition, but if we're talking about knives that are in new condition and what they cost at retail, there's basically going to be three factors that, like three variables that are going to affect the value or the price of those knives. One that, a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on is materials, right? Yeah, well, it's an expensive knife, but it's in, S90V, or it's in MagnaCut, or it's in, Rex 45 or something like that, right? Well, yes, materials do affect the cost of the knife, but not as much as a lot of people maybe imagine, right? You can get a knife in some kind of high-end materials for not a lot of money, right? Like this is a Boker Plus. This is the mini version of the Kwaiken, I think, right? Isn't that what that's called? Burnley Kwaiken. And this is in CPM S35 VN steel, so it's not an ultra premium steel, but it is particle metallurgy, right? It is high quality. This has got titanium bolsters, and I can't remember if we called this shredded carbon fiber or marbled carbon fiber. I guess probably shredded. But yeah, I mean it's the same kinds of materials that you're going to see in a lot of these other knives. A little bit less of it, right? Because this is a smaller knife. But you can get this you could get this. I got this when it was available. I don't think this model is still in production, but for like $89 or something like that, right? Not crazy expensive. Here's a Night Horse from Beyond EDC. Right, this is anodized blue titanium. It's a frame lock flipper. I mean, not a flipper. It's a frame lock knife. Big, right? So you got a big piece of CPMS 35 VN steel there, right? Same stuff as that little Burnley. And this is like $114, right? Which is not a bargain basement knife by any means, but most of the things we look at on the table today that have, a good particle metallurgy blade, especially a big one, and titanium handles, full titanium, are going to be more than that, right? A lot more than that. So it's not just that, like, okay, yeah, it's carbon fiber and so it's expensive, or of course it's expensive. It's in S45 VN or whatever. Nope, that's a factor. It is going to affect the price, but you can get a pretty affordable knife with some of these premium materials these days. There's a MagnaCut version of the Bestech Swordfish that comes in under $100. That's a 4-inch long MagnaCut blade, right? One of the most desirable particle metallurgy steels that you can buy. So yeah, materials affect the price, but they don't affect it as much as some people imagine. Another criterion is going to be the perceived rarity, right? Rarity, real or perceived, right? So some of the knives on the table here are like sprint runs or exclusives that were, limited to a certain quantity that were produced. Usually less than 1,000, right? I mean, depends on which manufacturer we're talking about and whether we're talking about a sprint or an exclusive, right? A sprint might be a low production number, but available from several different retailers. An exclusive would be available just from one retailer. That's, the basic supply and demand. If you're only going to make a limited quantity of something, and there's a lot of people who want it, that's going to make the price go up. And that's going to change the value of these things on the secondary market as well, right? So like, this is the Frade and Lock Company exclusive Spyderco Pair 3 in LMAX steel, right? Made in the USA. Same form factor as any other Pair 3, full flat grind, right? And then this one has marbled carbon fiber handles. Because this knife used premium materials and because it was produced in a limited quantity, and because Spyderco is a respected brand that a lot of people desire and lots of people collect, the original price on that thing when they were available from Frade and Lock Company, which is the only retailer that was selling them, was $220, which is a lot. I mean, that was in 2022, I think. So the last couple of years has been some pretty significant inflation. Maybe if that came out in 2025, it would have a higher street price even when it was launched. I don't know. But what I do know is that they're now being sold on the secondary market for around $400 a piece. I'm not really going to concentrate on the secondary market value of these knives. I mean, it's part of the conversation, but I'm talking about what you pay at retail from a authorized dealer when you buy one of these knives in new condition. Right? There are knives that that were very cheap when they were originally sold at retail, but then for one reason or another they became highly sought after collector's pieces. Even if they had kind of lousy materials. Spyderco has lots of examples of that, right? You look at a knife like the the Ketcherman, right, which was a big goofy folding fillet knife, FRN or GRN handle with a integrated clip that could very easily break off. And I don't remember what the steel was on the original version, probably VG10 or something. But, nothing extraordinary. But it was a knife that not many people had and wasn't produced all that long, and then it became a rarity and became hard to find. And so, it wasn't expensive as a new product when it was available, but then because it was not available and it was hard to obtain, it became a collector's item, and its value went up a lot on the secondary market. That's related to rarity. It's related to brand reputation a little bit, but it is kind of a different question than what I'm trying to get at today, which is sort of like, what's a reasonable price for a retailer to mark a knife in new condition when they're selling it at retail, right? So a couple of things that I've touched on: materials, perceived rarity, the brand prestige, right? I mean, that's part of the reason that this little Boker Plus is not nearly as expensive as some of the other things on the table here that use similar materials, is because Boker Plus is Boker's budget arm, right? If it was Boker Zollingen and it was made in Germany, those have a reputation, for reasons that may or may not be valid, of being superior and being more, and therefore more costly. And it's not just a matter of racism, right? I mean, this is made in China, and most of the Chinese Boker knives are going to be less expensive than the German Boker knives. But there are things on the table here that are made in China or elsewhere in the world. We've got things on the table from Taiwan and Japan and the United States and Italy. They can be expensive, but it has to do more with sort of like the perception of the brand. Like We Knives is a Chinese company, and they make some very premium things that are sold at high prices. Their subsidiary, Civivi, is more of a budget brand. And so you could have a Civivi that has really nice materials, and it's probably made in the same factory as the We, but it's going to be a lot less because it's a Civivi and not a We, right? And is that logical? I mean, not necessarily. I mean, there's a reason that people associate the We brand with quality. It's because we decided, we decided to put the We branding on things that were their best products, right? And to put the Civivi branding on things that were a little less special. It gets a little, the lines get blurred a little bit, right? There's some very nice Civivi things, but they're not going to be as expensive as like a maybe less impressive thing from We, even though it's the same company. So that's a factor. Brand prestige is a factor, right? Another factor is the production process, right? Obviously, that's a really big difference separating regular production knives from custom knives, right? If it's Bob Terzuola in his workshop building an ATCF one at a time at home, those knives are going to sell for a lot more than an ATCF mass-produced in Italy by Fox Knives, even though it's the same design and maybe the same materials. It's a more labor-intensive thing for one guy to build a knife than for a company to build a knife. But that's not the only way that the sort of production process has an impact on price, right? So some of the knives on this table, like this Sage 5, right? This thing is $300, and it's not a whole lot different than any other Sage 5, right? That has a compression lock and G10 scales. And it's going to have the same form factor, same wire clip. You know, going to be made in, I think these are made in Taiwan, right? Yeah, Taiwan. But this one's more expensive than some of the other ones that you could get. You could say that that's because of the materials, right? That the materials here with CPM Rex 121, that's a more exotic steel than, you know, S30V or something. But the reason that Rex 121 is not used as often to make knives is because the production process is more difficult, right? And you have a highly wear-resistant steel like this, it's going to take longer on the machines to mill it, right? To like grind it and cut it. It's going to wear out those tools that you use in the process of making the knife more quickly than if you were using a less wear-resistant steel. So, you know, do we put that in a category of this is expensive because the materials are expensive? Well, no. I mean, buying the Rex 121, like a billet of it, or like a big, you know, a big quantity of it, is not going to be a lot more expensive than buying a, you know, big quantity of, you know, CPM S30V or something. But this is going to take a lot longer to actually turn into knives. And it's going to put more wear on the machines that do it, right? On the equipment that's used in the process. I think that's a fourth category. So we've got materials, the production process, you know, and the difficulty of production, the rarity or perceived rarity. I'll talk a little bit about the difference between actual rarity and perceived rarity in a minute. And then the brand prestige. Those are the four things I think that affect or should affect the price of a new knife at a retailer. All right, so let's just go through these. I'm going to go through these, talk about what some of these expensive knives are and what factors are relevant for each of these, and then, you know, some stuff will come up, I'm sure, as we have that conversation. This is not a scripted. I mean, I have some notes here, but I don't have a script to work from, so I'm speaking extemporaneously, and things will come up. All right, so I already kind of mentioned the ATCF, right? So, and I've got lots of videos on knives by Bob Terzuola. He's one of my favorite knife makers. This is a current production knife from Fox Knives in Maniago, Italy. MagnaCut steel. Micarta in this case, handle scales. There's also a version with titanium. There was a version with carbon fiber that was only available for a short while. I don't know that they were produced. Well, I guess they were produced in limited quantities, but it was just like a Christmas special that they put out in 2024. The titanium. If you go to Bob's website, Bob Terzuola, it's terzuola.net. If you go to his website, the micarta version and the titanium version are listed at the same price, which is $295. But if you look at some other retailers, you're going to see that the titanium version costs a little more than the micarta version. And, you know, if you do some comparison shopping, you can find this for a little bit better price. I bought this one from Lamnia web store, which is in Europe, and even with the shipping and stuff, it was less expensive than buying from most US retailers at the time that I bought it. That could be different now, right? And then there's another version of this that is in green micarta with a stone-washed blade, and it says it's like a special edition, but it doesn't define what that is, right? Is that the same as like a sprint run, or are they, you know, how special is it? How many are you making? How many are you planning to make of the regular editions, right? How many years is this thing going to be available? We don't know. We don't know. So because it says special edition, does that mean that, you can price it at a higher point. Not sure about that. It's the same knife as this, except for the blade finish, right? This is satin finish, and then the special edition has a stone washed finish on the blade, and then this is sort of a smoother micarta than the green micarta that's used on the special edition. And I've done a video on both of these, so you're welcome to, if you want to know more about these, you can look back in my channel. It's not too long ago. I talked about both of these knives. All right, so that's, yes, and of course, it's going to be less expensive to buy a production knife made in a factory in Italy than to buy a knife made by the man himself in his workshop alone in California, right? And his customs are only going to get more valuable because, he's still active, but he won't be forever. So that's a whole other thing. I don't want to be I don't want to be grim about it. Bob, I hope you live for a long time. And I hope you keep making knives. Okay, so that's a consideration. Here's another pair of three, right? We looked at the LMAX one. This is not a sprint run, but this is more expensive than a regular production pair of three because of the materials. Or is it because of the production costs associated with the materials? Or are those two things kind of the same? So this is Maximet, right? And Maximet is a really wear-resistant steel. It's a pain in the butt to sharpen this thing, and it's probably a pain in the butt to make it too, to grind it in the first place. So these go for, what do they go for? I wrote it down over here. $265 is what the retail price is on the Maximet pair 3. Now, keep in mind, I'm just telling you what if you went to like Knife Center or Blade HQ, what the price would normally be when you land there. Stuff goes on sale sometimes, right? Even Spyderco has MAP sales sometimes. Even Benchmade has sales sometimes. So most of these things I didn't pay full retail price for, right? But I'm telling you what the retail price is on them. An example of that. This is the Wee Curvaceous, right? Really nice materials on this. We've got carbon fiber, right? Marbled carbon fiber, titanium bolsters. It's a bolster lock, or, I'd call it a frame lock, but I think generally people call that a bolster lock. CPM 20 CV, bead blasted. It's got a compound grind, right? Milled titanium clip. Everything's chamfered, and the grinds are symmetrical, and it's centered, and quality control is really good. Okay, they're going for about $250 right now, and they were $320 for a long time. That was what their retail price was. So it's interesting because when something's on closeout, the rarity sort of goes up, right? Because you're like, okay, well, they're not going to make any more once they're gone. Whereas before, if it was a regular production knife, they might make them forever, right? And yet, they're selling them at a lower price. So that's an interesting kind of circumstance. Sometimes when stuff is on closeout, it's very tempting because it's like, well, not only is it the last chance I'll have to get that in new condition, maybe, but it's also cheaper than it used to be. So, interesting. Okay. Another Spyderco. This is the fluted carbon fiber native 5, right, with an S90V blade, right? So materials, pretty high-end stuff, some extra time spent in production to put the texturing. This has contoured handle scales slightly, right? And it's got the fluting in there, which is not showing up real well on the camera, but it's there. I can feel it. The retail price on this is $300. I think they are a sprint run, but they're not like some of the sprint runs with Spyderco that sell out in like 10 minutes, right? So maybe that's because the price was prohibitive. Maybe it was because people didn't feel like this was enough of a sort of special difference from all the other options that they could have with native 5s. I don't know. But yeah, they're selling for $300, and they're still around. So the fact that they didn't all sell out seems to suggest that, since it was a sprint run, maybe they're priced a little bit too high. All right, I believe this is not a sprint. I'm sorry, I should have checked. This is the Spyderco NAND. It is a double detent knife, so no lock, right? Titanium, full titanium, and M398, which is a bit of an exotic material, but it's also a material that's expensive to machine because it's just very wear resistant. These go for $243.75 right now, $243.75. And I think a lot of people, at least in the U.S., are not jumping on them at that price. And this is an interesting circumstance because in the U.S., this is not a real compelling option, right? You can spend that much money for a knife that doesn't even lock. Well, if you're in a country that has restrictions on locking knives and you're not allowed to carry a locking knife and you don't want to, get in trouble, if you want to be compliant with the law, then this is appealing because, there aren't great options for people in those circumstances. There are not a lot of full titanium, sort of higher end knives with premium steel that have a short enough blade and the absence of a lock in order to comply with local laws in some places. So that's a sort of special circumstance that's affecting the price. The Subvert is a sprint. In terms of retail price, it was one of the more expensive Spydercos available. There are, a lot of Spydercos that are worth more because they've been out of production for a long time and they've become collectible, beloved, sought after Grail knives or whatever, in ways that they weren't when they were new. But this one, as a new knife was like $420. Is that right? Subvert, yeah, $420. So what do we got here? We've got CPM 20 CV blade steel, a big piece of it, right? We've got contoured carbon fiber handle scales, and we've got a titanium frame or titanium liners, depending on how you want to define this. Is it a frame lock or is it a liner lock? I think it's being listed as a liner lock with carbon fiber handles and titanium liner. But that liner is pretty substantial. You could take those carbon fiber handle scales away and still have a handle, right? Not just liners. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it's big, it's nice, it was produced in limited quantities. They sold out. People evidently found that price acceptable for what they were getting in this case. It had rarity, it had brand prestige, it had high quality materials. There was some production cost involved here, right? This is contoured. That takes time. That takes, it costs more to make a contoured handle than to make a flat handle, right? And it's also just a really cool knife. This is one of my favorites. All right, I didn't do a very good job flicking it open there. Let's try that again. There we go. All right, made in Taiwan, right? Which is, some people don't want to pay a lot of money for a knife unless it's made in the United States. That's fine. There are enough people out there that are perfectly happy to pay, premium knife prices for a premium knife made in Taiwan or in China or in Italy or Japan, right? So that's not something that everybody's hung up on. But I do, I get it that some people want to buy stuff from their own country, or maybe they have an affinity for a certain tradition, right? Like it's kind of cool to buy a knife that was made in Maniago or a knife that was made in Zollingen because those places have long historical traditions of knife making. So that could influence an individual's thinking on what they're willing to pay for a knife. Moving on. So here we have the Chris Reeve knives, Menandi. Probably saying that wrong. This is one of the smaller Chris Reeve knives. Titanium frame, box elder. I think they call these inlays on the Chris Reeve website. They're not really inlaid though; they're onlaid. But yeah, titanium. Nice pocket clip, right? Machined pocket clip. Magna cut steel, I believe, in this blade. A big part of the, if you go and read the product description on this, a big part of what they are proud of when they're selling this knife is the blade grind and the finish. And the finish on this one is kind of trashed because it was a user. So, that's that factor of condition, which we're kind of setting aside and saying, okay, well, what's a fair price for these knives in new condition? This was $500 was the MSRP on it, or not MSRP, but the actual retail price, like what it would cost you if you went to Knife Center and bought it, or Blade HQ or whatever. Very good materials. Great brand reputation, right? Chris Reeve Knives is one of the most respected and sought after brands. They have a really excellent support and warranty. You can send it in for free spa treatment, right, to get your knife cleaned up by them and sharpened and all that stuff. There are several companies that offer that, though, right? And really, I think in this case, it's the brand. Yes, it's a very nice knife. It's a very smooth operation. All the, the spine is crowned. Everything's really nicely done, and some of it's done by hand. So we've got sort of a mix of different things influencing that price. But, you know, if you had exactly this knife and it was put out by Kaiser or something, I know some people are laughing because they think, well, Kaiser couldn't possibly produce that knife. Well, you know, they could, right? If they put the same time and attention into it as Chris Reeve does, and if individual people were doing the finishing and stuff, yeah, they probably could. But nobody would pay $500 for it. So I think brand reputation, brand prestige, is a big factor in the price of Chris Reeve knives. And it's, you know, I mean, they've earned that prestige in many ways, right? I mean, Chris Reeve knives, I mean, Spyderco still calls the frame lock the Chris Reeve integral lock, right? Because Chris Reeve was the, you know, originator of that style of knife lock. Chris Reeve was involved in the introduction of CPM S30V, right? One of the first sort of highly specialized powder metallurgy knife steels, you know. So yeah, you know, people seem to be satisfied with the knives they buy at those prices from Chris Reeve knives. That's fine. Okay, Hinderer. I've got a couple of Hinderers on the table here. These are both XM18s. Same size, different blade profile, different blade thickness. This one's a fatty, this one's a skinny. This one's a fatty Warncliffe. This one's a skinny slicer. This is MagnaCut. This is S45VN. If you got one, I've got a couple of others in other Hinderer knives in CPM 20 CV XM18s as well that are you know, that neither fat nor slim. They're the regular size, regular blade stock thickness. And they're all the same price. They're all $425. And they have, you know, I have really almost no notes about Hinderer knives. They do everything as well as I could expect a knife to possibly be. You know, blade finishes are great. This is the working finish, but their stonewash finish is fine. It's very nice. You know, their other finishes are nice. So these are among the most expensive production knives I have, right? I only own a couple of custom knives, but and those, they have higher original prices than these production or mid-tech knives. And one of the things about Chris Reeve knives is that a lot of people buy them and then they buy little updates to them, little accessories to spiff them up, right? I mean, they replace the back spacers and they replace the clip and they replace the show side scale, and they're not back spacers, standoffs, I guess those are. And they replace this little insert here, right? You know, and pretty soon a knife that was $400, you know, somebody has put $700 or $800 into it. I haven't done that, but a lot of people like to do that. These had a perception of rarity for a long time, right? There would be a drop on like DLT or someplace, and you'd have to get on there and buy whatever you could get in your shopping cart in the first 5 minutes because they'd all be gone. And then the next batch would be different. So, you know, if you really liked one, because of the colorways or the blade profile, or, you know, oh, this one's got a harpoon tip, or this one's a Tonto point, or this one's a Bowie, or whatever. And the last several batches I saw didn't have those features. People would jump right on it, and they'd sell out. So obviously, you know, people felt like the price was acceptable to them, who wanted this knife. They've increased their production capacity, right? So it's no longer the case that if you see a Hinderer knife, you know, you have to buy it immediately or it'll be gone. I mean, that could still happen, right? But, you know, it's also, you don't have to be there on drop day, right? Like, I could go online right now and I could go to multiple retailers and find Hinderer knives in stock. That didn't used to be the case. Did the price come down? No, it did not. These are the same price as they were when they were really hard to obtain. I guess that's working for the company, right? I mean, they would adjust their prices if they needed to stay in business, but I guess they don't need to. And people are still very pleased with what they get, right? I mean, they've increased their production capacity, but as far as I know, they have not lowered their production standards or their production quality at all. So, yeah, I mean, and, you know, these come with multiple different sets of, you can put washers or bearings in these, and it comes with both options. It comes with 3 options, actually. Yeah, so that's a point of reference, okay? It's $425 for an XM18. That'll be important later, I think, in this conversation. All right. Hinderer, we've got a ProTech down here. This has been carried and used, but we're going to pretend like it's new and talk about, you know, whether or not the new price of a ProTech Magic is comprehensible, right? So these are, as I said, automatic knives. There's the serial number on there. Not a lot of billboarding, right? Bent deep carry pocket clip. Not really anything special. Little bit of detail, you know, some milling and stuff involved in producing this. The really cool thing about this particular model is this bolster actuated release, right? And then we get this blade, which is nicely finished. It's a 2-tone blade, right? It's got a satin flat and then a stone washed grind. 154 cm. Not a particle metallurgy steel. Traditional ingot formed steel. Perfectly good steel. You know, a lot of people like 154 cm. I like 154 cm, but I don't consider it a high end or a rare steel at all. And so that knife at $315 is what the retail price on those are. It's a little spendy. And part of that might have been that they were a little hard to obtain for a while. I mean, automatic knives in general were kind of hard to obtain if you weren't like active duty military or, you know, like a first responder. In a lot of states, you couldn't legally buy them for a long time. But now that's mostly changed. You know, in most states, it's legal to buy and own and carry, in a lot of states, automatic knives. What's affecting the value of it are sort of the same criteria that affect the value of other knives, right? Materials, brand prestige, uh, production complexity or cost, right? And perceived rarity. These were not available for a while. Now there's like 4 different versions of it with different colorways that are available. This colorway is not available right now. The tuxedo, black and white. You can get all black, or you can get like black and blue, or I mean, I can't remember exactly what the options are. But does that mean that this one is worth more now because people might like that kind of classic white and black? Well, what if they bring it back next year? You know, is it rare? Well, it's rare at the moment, sort of. But I mean, it was, you go back a couple of years before this recent batch was available, and this was very rare. And then at the moment, this colorway is rare, but that's subject to change, right? So that's one of the reasons that the value of knives on the secondary market fluctuates. Oh. Pair 3 slid off the table. I think it's fine. The operator edition of the ProTech Malibu. All right, this thing's special, right? It's the same form factor as every other Malibu. It's 20 CV blade steel, which is, some of them have 20 CV, some of them have other models, not the operator model. Some of them have Magna Cut, some of them have, M390 or something. They're different blade steels. So the Malibu, I think, it's another one of those things where it had weird sort of like perceived rarity, because they would come out in batches. There was a lot of demand for them. They'd sell out immediately. And then people put them on eBay for like twice what they cost. They were like $220 or something like that, was the retail price for a Malibu. And then they'd be gone, as soon as a batch landed somewhere. And then they'd show up on eBay for like $400, and people would pay it. And that was the case for a while. Now, Malibus are in stock and regularly available, and they go for about the same price as they used to 220-ish, right? But this one, even though this came after that bubble burst and the secondary market kind of calmed down for ProTech Malibus in general, this was the operator edition, right? ProTech did operator editions of several other knives that were sterile, right? They didn't have any markings on them, right? Doesn't say ProTech, doesn't say Malibu, doesn't say CPM 20 CV. Everything's blacked out, everything's matte finished, and that's tritium, which is, it's going to glow in the dark. Yeah. So the idea was that these would be, more appropriate for tactical use, I guess. I didn't see anywhere that ProTech was saying that this was never going to be made again, right? But they're not available now, right? They were available. They sold them at a higher price. They sold them at $340 was what they were selling these for. And I haven't checked, but I bet they're going for more than that on eBay right now. And people are under the perception that they're rare and that they, the ones in existence are the only ones that will ever exist. Do we know that for sure? I don't. Maybe somebody said that at some point, but I didn't see that when I went to, buy this. I just thought, hey, that's different. Aluminum handles on this. So materials are, I mean, yeah, it's good blade steel and it's well made. You know, it's a very good button lock. But the materials are not extraordinary. I mean, tritium's kind of cool, but that's not worth a $120 markup for a little tiny piece of tritium. Oh, what do you guys think? So this is the Spyderco Swayback from, I'm going to mispronounce this guy's name, Slysz, I think, something like that. He's Polish, this designer, and he's made some really cool knives. He's a well-regarded designer. This is a frame lock. It's full titanium. It's contoured, right? So that's going to involve some more time on the machines. Crowned spine. Nice finish on this blade. This is CTS XHP, which is, you know, a good particle metallurgy steel. It's like a stainless particle metallurgy version of D2 in terms of its performance. Retain an edge really well. Not the toughest steel in the world, but reasonably tough. And in this case, stainless, which is a big step up from regular, like D2, which is not stainless. No over travel arrestor or anything. There is a steel lock insert, right? So the lock bar should last longer without getting all lock sticky than if it was just titanium. Washers, not bearings. This has got a hollow grind. You know, a lot of Spydercos have a flat grind. These, the MSRP on them was originally almost $450. $448.50 was what they theoretically would cost, but they, you know, they didn't ever cost that from retailers. The map prices were lower than that, but they were spendy. They were not cheap until, well, not, and they never were cheap, but until they were on closeout, right? And then Spyderco had some left, and they were selling them at $199, which is a lot less than $450. So, and it wasn't like a Sprint, right? It was a regular production model that they just eventually discontinued. Was it rare? Well, I mean, it was, not a lot of people had them because not a lot of people wanted to spend $450 on a, well, or, you know, over $300 on a knife. But it was available, right? And there's still some of these in stock at $200, which tells me that they were definitely overpriced when they were a lot higher than that. I like this knife. A lot of people don't love this knife. You can't Spidey flick it because the lock bar covers the hole, and that the hole itself is not super accessible even from the show side. But it's fine, and you know, it's elegant. All right. Benchmade. We've got a couple Benchmades on the table today. This is the Crooked River, full-size Crooked River. So it's got a 4-inch blade, CPM S30V, so nothing exotic, but a good, you know, proven steel. Aluminum bolsters, not titanium. The axis lock, which, you know, is now, since the patent has expired, we see that crossbar lock very commonly now. It used to be that you had to spend the extra to get a Benchmade if you wanted that lock. Diamond wood handle scales on this. Orange G10 backspacer. Diamond wood is an engineered wood. It's basically the same thing as pack of wood. It's laminated and, you know, infused with epoxy or something to make it more stable and resistant to changes in temperature and humidity and stuff like that than just natural wood would be. Saber height, flat grind. These are like what do they go for? Crooked River, 320. 320 is what these go for. If you were to go to Blade HQ right now and buy this knife, which is still in production, it would be 320. I didn't pay that much for it. I wouldn't pay that much for it. It's a cool knife, but, you know, it's kind of, I can get all these features for a lot less. The materials are nothing special. I mean, they're good. They're good. I think a big part of the price of this knife is brand prestige, right? The butterfly tax, right? Benchmade is a brand that people have heard of. Even people that aren't really into knives know that, you know, Benchmade is a premium brand. So if they decide, you know, I want a really good knife, and they're going to buy one knife in their lifetime, might be a Benchmade. So I think that knife is overpriced. There are some versions of it now that have more premium steel, and the prices are higher. So, you know, that's, people have all kinds of feelings about Benchmade. I like a lot of Benchmade stuff, but I think that paying full retail for a Crooked River would be a mistake. Zero tolerance. This model is no longer in production. This is the, what was this? The 640, 0640, 0640. Has this green carbon fiber, which is a little different, right? Titanium and CPM 20 CV blade. Pretty big. It's like 3 3/4 inches, something like that. Yeah. On the secondary market, these go for more than they sold at retail, because of that sort of presumed rarity. They're not going to make this model again, right? I believe it's a titanium pocket clip. I didn't pay full price for this, and I wouldn't personally. But ZT has a lot of fans, so some people think that that's a reasonable value. Yeah. So this is another Benchmade. This is the Tengu, which was a collaboration with Jared Oser. 20 CV blade steel, contour G10. Excuse me. No pocket clip. This comes with a little leather slip. Neat backspacer, layered black and white G10. So, you know, if you wanted a Jared Oser knife before the Tengu came out, you'd have to pay custom knife prices and get one from Jared Oser. And it'd be real expensive. So if people were fans of his when this knife launched, and they, you know, were after a Gyarados knife, then it would seem like a bargain at $220, right? That's a lot less than a custom knife. But evidently there were not enough of those people to either keep the knife in production or keep it at that price. It was discounted on closeout to $150, so almost cut in half. And they're gone now. So I think people were much happier paying $150 for the Tengu than $220. I like it. It's a nice knife. I didn't pay $220. All right. One more Benchmade. Okay, this is the blinged out version of the 940 Osborne, right? The regular production 940 Osborne had and has green coated aluminum handle scales that are milled, right? There is some complexity in the, you know, construction process of this knife, manufacturing process of this knife. The regular version of the 940 has S30V blade steel. This is S90V, and it's got a different finish. It's stone washed instead of satin finish. Same form factor. Basically, I think at one point they switched over to barrel spacers on some of the later 940 models. The original ones had a backspacer, titanium backspacer. All right, well, these go for, let's see, what did the retail price on this is $350, and they're still in production, and I have encountered them in the wild. I have run into people who are carrying this knife, and they like it. I like it. I didn't pay that for it. I didn't pay full retail for it. But you know, you got your high quality materials, you got your brand prestige. You do have some production costs that, you know, this knife would be cheaper if it was just flat handle scales, right? The blade has got a swedge and stuff, you know. S90V is not as hard to work with as like Rex 121, but it's not the easiest material in the world to work with. So, all right. Part of that is you're paying for the butterfly tax, right? Fellkniven. Right, these are from what, Finland? Norway? Finland, I think. It's got a little dust on it because I had it open on a shelf. This is the PXL, and there have been a few different versions of this knife. This has got contoured smooth micarta, burgundy micarta, handle scales, steel bolsters, and then Fellkniven's 3G laminated steel, which the core of that is the I think it's the Japanese super gold, which is a particle metallurgy steel. So it's, you know, pretty special. A little dated at this point. They stopped doing them in that 3G blade steel and switched to LMAX, I think, at some point. pocket clip on this thing sucks. But other than that, it's a very nicely made knife. Lots of attention to detail. You know, when this was new, it was really pretty. Now it's got some snail trails and stuff on the bolsters. But what were these selling for? Almost $300. There's a version of it now that has a polymer handle, and I don't know what the blade steel is of the current model, but it's a less premium version of the PXL, and so it's like 170 or something. I don't know. Do you guys think this is worth over $300? Liner lock. Yeah. From Japan. Mkusta. This is the Tactility Elite. So a lot of Mkusta knives have VG10 core Damascus steel. So they've got, you know, VG10 in the center, sandwiched between some pieces of like high nickel content Damascus. That's not the case here. This is a laminated steel with a super gold as the core, which is a particle metallurgy steel. It's an older steel. It actually predates CPM S30V. A lot of people think that S30V was the first particle metallurgy steel developed specifically for cutlery. A lot of people think that. SPG2 was out before S30V, and it was designed for cutlery. Corian, I think, is the material that they used for the handles. There's also a black version of this with micarta handles, and there's a ironwood version. All of them retail around like $220-ish. Some interesting file work on the pocket clip, and you know, like this hammered finish on the blade. I really like this knife. I paid close to full price for it, which I rarely do. 3.75 inch blade, deep carry, pocket clip. And Mkusta's whole thing is, they, you know, before we had the term midtech, that was their idea, was, okay, we're going to mass produce the knives to the point that they're like 80% done, and then we're going to hand finish them the rest of the way to get, you know, really quality piece. Compared to some of the other stuff on this table, this is a hell of a knife for $200, I think. There's the lockup. All right. Another expensive Spyderco, made in Italy this time by Lion Steel. This is the sprint run of the Spy Opera. Okay, so the Spy Opera, the regular version of the Spy Opera, the standard production, has, I think, an M390 blade, so, you know, high quality steel, and it's like a brown micarta or a natural micarta handle scale with a back lock and a wire pocket clip. And this version has a Thor Damasteel. So that is particle metallurgy steel, and it gives us that Damascus pattern. And then we've got the carbon fiber handles. And the Italians often do a really nice job with like crown spines, right? This is like a nicely crown spine. That kind of detail does involve some extra time, right, and attention in the production process, and it will add to the costs. This has got a little bit of contour to the handle scales. That takes time too. Right? These are still available, even though they are Sprint and they've been out for a while. $406. And some Spyderco Sprint runs disappear in minutes. This one did not. It's not because this is not a good knife. It's a very nice knife. It's an extremely nice knife. It's one of the nicest knives I own. But $400 is a lot of money, right? and you can get a much less expensive knife that also has premium steel, that has exactly the same form factor. Right? You can get the regular production Spy Opera, which is really nice as well, for a lot less than half. Even the back spring on this and the back lock is crowned. Yeah, and the hardware is fancy. Yeah. Line Steel did a really nice job. But once you're talking about spending $400, you start to have some really compelling options, some alternatives, right? These two knives were in the same ballpark, price-wise. And yeah, I mean, there are some people who would rather have this. There are some people who would rather have a Hinderer, right? I mean, it's very different. It's apples and oranges for sure. But I think there's a reason that this Sprint run is still in stock after it's been out for, what, a couple years? And I think that it's price prohibitive for people. Is it too expensive? Well, it's too expensive for some buyers. So there is a regular production Spydie Chef, which is full titanium and has an LC200N flat ground blade. This is the Knife Joy exclusive Spydie Chef, which is the same, but with blue anodized titanium. And these are available at a little bit lower price than the standard production, which is a neat thing that happens sometimes, that you can get, a Sprint run or an exclusive for actually less than what it would cost you to get the version that's normally available, which that kind of goes against the whole concept of rarity increasing price. But these are evidently not that rare because they've been available. They're still available from Knife Joy. And let's see, they're on sale right now. They were $303 at one point, and now they're $239. So $239 gets you full titanium frame lock. These are made in Taiwan. Okay, not one of the most expensive knives on the table. LC200N is an interesting steel. It's a good steel. It's not really in the same premium category as most of the stuff on the table here. The production process is actually a little bit special on the way they do to get the high nitrogen content in the LC200. So it's a little bit more of a special steel, and it has the unique quality of being extremely corrosion resistant, which is why it makes sense to use it in a knife like the Spydie Chef, which is designed for food prep, right? So you could cut vegetables with this thing all day and wash it off, and it's not going to get rusty on you. So it's an appropriate choice for the knife, but it's not a super premium steel. It's not a super expensive steel. Doesn't hold an edge as long as many of the other steels on the table today. But I understand why why they would choose LC200N for this knife that has a very specific purpose. All right. I have a whole video on the Hatamoto, and you can go check it out. I think it'll be just shortly before this video in my feed. But CPM 20CV, carbon fiber, steel bolsters, not titanium, 4-inch blade, made in Taiwan, liner lock. The normal retail price on the Hatamoto is $330. If you stuck with me this long, thank you very much. We're approaching the end. I'm going to unbox one thing here and then have some final thoughts about knife prices. I think this is a package from Knife Joy, and I think I know what's in here. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. I'm going to use that little Burnley that I showed you earlier. Box has lots of tape on it. Slysz. Slysz Bowie. So that's the same. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name. That's the same guy who designed the Spyderco Chef and the Swayback and things like the Techno, right? And Techno 2 or whatever. I'm probably among the last knife YouTubers to do a video on this knife. All right, so it explains to us the difference here between an exclusive and a sprint, right? A sprint is done in limited quantities and is usually available through multiple retailers. Exclusive is only done through one retailer, but it says, although multiple runs of it may be made. Do you see that? Okay. It tells us about the designer. Tells us about the full flat ground blade. M390 steel. Machined titanium handles with a little curve, a little contouring on the surface. In this case, they're anodized blue. The original were not. Yeah, all right, well, let's take a look. I think that this is probably the same anodized titanium as the Spyderco Chef. I think it's just that I've handled the Spyderco Chef, and so it's started to develop. Yeah, because if you look under the clip, or I haven't touched it, yeah. And when I first got the Spyderco Chef, I took it out of the box and I looked at it for a minute, and it had some dark blotches on it. And I was like, what the heck? And I emailed Knife Joy, and I said, what's going on? I've got blotches on my knife here. Is that normal? Should I exchange it? What's going on? And they said, wash it with Windex. Apparently that will take your finger oils off and restore the original anodized look of it. I can't remember if I tried that or if I just said, okay, all right, fine. All right. So, a nice clip point. Ergonomically very comfortable handle. Very good jimping. Crowned spine, right? G10 backspacer. Frame lock, but they did add a lock insert because the originals was just titanium, and so you get some lock stick when it engaged with the blade. So in that sense, I think the difference between this and the original is an improvement. What is not so much of an improvement is the blade finish. Right, this is a satin finish, which is fine, but the original had a sort of like a high polish stone wash finish. Maybe kind of like what's on the Swayback, right? Which is, you know, I think is nicer. And the original had raw titanium, not anodized titanium, so it's in some ways more like this Swayback. Right, okay. So, in terms of the assessment of value, right, this should be more than the Spidey Chef, right? Spidey Chef is going for like $250-ish. This is made with similar materials, but a more premium blade steel, right? And the LC200N in the Spidey Chef is not as premium or as difficult to machine as M390, right? That's what we've got here, M390, I believe. Yeah. Okay, so that would justify some increase in cost over the Spidey Chef. This has contoured titanium handle scales, whereas the Spidey Chef has flat handle scales. That's going to that's a more costly production. G10 backspacer really shouldn't affect the price very much. A lot of people don't like that G10 backspacer. They both have wire pocket clips, both have frame locks, both have washers. They're both exclusives from the same retailer. So what happened with the Slysz Bowie? So the original version was out. It was a regular production knife, I think. I don't think it was a Sprint, but it wasn't in production for very long. It was costly, but not outrageously costly. And then, you know, they discontinued it. And on the secondary market, the prices for them were nuts, right? People were listing them on eBay for $800-900, $1,000, right? And you know, this knife had a sort of a grail reputation. Knife reviewer Nick Shabazz did an influential review of the original Slysz Bowie and said it was his favorite knife. And that means a lot coming from a guy who owns and has handled and has reviewed lots and lots and lots of knives. So it became a very sought after. I'm not saying Nick is the reason that the knife became so sought after, but it certainly was a factor, right? So it was unavailable for a while, and then Knifejoy did a exclusive run, and they were a little different than the originals. Some people liked the changes. Some people did not like the changes, including Nick Shabazz. He, preferred the original. Metal Complex said he liked the original better than the new exclusive run. But they were priced at, like $450. And people were angry that they couldn't afford them, but they all sold out. And then they started showing up on eBay for a bunch more. And they were sold out for a while, and then there were more, right? There was, in May of 2025, on Instagram, Knifejoy said, hey, we got some more. And they said, once they're gone, they're gone. Since that May drop, I'm pretty sure I've seen this Bowie listed as sold out, at least briefly on their website. It is not currently sold out. Now there are explanations for that, right? I mean, could be that some people bought them and returned them. Maybe somebody else had this knife before I did. I don't know. But, or maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe it didn't say sold out. Maybe I was looking at something else. But I thought I saw these were sold out since the May drop of the second batch. It's July right now, mid-July. I just got this thing. They're still in stock. And, I think the people that bought them in that first drop probably a little annoyed, because part of the reason that they were willing to spend what they were willing to spend on this was that they had a perception of it being exclusive and rare. And it's turned out not to be as rare as they thought. So right now on Instagram, Knifejoy says, when they're gone, they're gone. Okay. Does that mean Spyderco is not going to make a different version of this as an exclusive with a different retailer? We don't know that. That could happen. Maybe not anytime soon, but it could happen eventually. If you're buying a knife because you think it's extremely rare, maybe especially with Spyderco, you got to have a little bit of skepticism about whether or not it's going to, really be rare, or if it'll be available again but a little different, right? They wouldn't partner with another knife retailer and produce exactly this blue anodized titanium handles with satin finished M390 blade. But could they offer it in a different steel or a different handle material or a different color? They could. There's no guarantee that they won't. Don't go chasing things like this because it's an investment. I would say, buy the knife if you really like the knife and you really want the knife. Because, it's going to be a different calculation for different people, depending on what your budget is and, what your financial circumstances are and how much this particular knife appeals to you. And it's not going to be a total loss in any case. If you buy a knife like this, you may, some people are buying them thinking that they're going to double their money and turn around and flip them on eBay. They're going on eBay right now for $5 less than they're going from Knifejoy. Which is, that's not the end of the world, right? If you have this knife for a while and then you decide you don't want it, and you only lost $5 if you sell it on eBay, plus the, eBay's commissions and stuff. If what you want is to own a really nice knife and you've got $450 to spend, you could get this. Hey, look, same color. Blue anodized titanium. battle-worn finish in this case, is what Hinderer calls that, right? But maybe this is a little more premium in some ways. I think this knife feels a lot more valuable and premium to me than this Bowie. Both made in Taiwan. There's the lockup. But I knew I was going to unbox this knife, and that, you know, every other person reviewing knives on YouTube has already talked about this knife. So I thought I better put it in a bit broader context and offer some discussion of knife pricing and the factors that influence it in general, instead of just talking about, is this Bowie worth $450? Hey, you couldn't have, you know, this is $50 more, right? All right. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching the video. If you like knives, subscribe to my channel and you'll see more of them.